Long ago the galaxy was reshaped by fire and war, and at the heart of that destruction was the fall of humankind. The alien empire had recorded their victory with pride, writing in their history books that Earth was burned into ash and the human race erased forever. To the younger generations of alien children, humans were nothing but a legend, a warning of what happens to those who resist the empire's rule. Teachers told them that humans had been reckless, too stubborn, too chaotic to survive in a galaxy that demanded order. But outside of the great shining cities of the empire, whispers traveled like smoke through black markets, secret ports, and outlaw stations. Smugglers spoke of strange signals heard in dead space, transmissions in a language no one had spoken aloud for centuries. It was a language with sharp edges and fierce tones, and though many aliens could not translate it, they all knew the sound. It was human. In a remote sector far from the Empire's heart, one alien patrol ship drifted silently through the remains of a forgotten battlefield. Wreckage floated across the stars, burnt-out cruisers, and twisted metal like ghosts of a war too old to remember. The crew had expected silence, but their instruments flickered with life. A signal, faint but steady, pulsed in the void. The captain ordered it played through the ship's speakers. A harsh voice broke through the static, heavy with defiance. None of the crew understood the words, but every one of them felt the chill. The voice carried a promise, not of surrender, but of return. Then the signal vanished as suddenly as it appeared, leaving the crew staring at each other in silence. None of them dared report the truth, for who would believe it? Humanity was gone. Humanity was a story. And yet, the stars seemed to disagree. Back in the Empire's capital, the rulers laughed at such tales. To them, humans were a closed chapter, a defeated enemy. But unease lingered among the military. Reports trickled in from border outposts about strange sightings, dark shapes of ships moving faster than expected, blurs that sensors failed to track, faint traces of energy signatures that did not match any known alien fleet. A council was held, and admirals argued fiercely. Some claimed it was nothing more than pirates imitating the old style of human ships to spread fear. Others, older and wiser, remembered the human wars. They remembered how humans fought with fire in their hearts, how they adapted, how they refused to kneel. The possibility that even a fragment of that race survived was not only troubling, it was terrifying. Whispers of fear grew louder when scouts found something unexpected. In the graveyard of ships left adrift near a collapsed star, they discovered the remains of alien cruisers and, hidden among them, fragments of human vessels. The metal was scarred, but it carried markings that no other species used. Deep within one wreck, carved roughly into the steel, was a message written in the human tongue: "We are not finished." The words echoed through the alien high command like thunder. To some, it was impossible, a trick or forgery. To others, it was proof that ghosts walked among the stars. The message was simple, but its weight was undeniable. If even one human had survived, then perhaps more waited, hidden, watching, preparing. For centuries the Empire had taught its people that the galaxy was secure under their control, that no enemy remained to challenge them. Now cracks appeared in that certainty. Traders avoided lonely star systems, fearful of shadows that followed their ships. Pilots swore they had seen human warships watching from the edge of sensor range before vanishing into the dark. Each story was dismissed in public, but in private, commanders whispered of a truth too dangerous to speak aloud. Humanity was not dead. Humanity was waiting. The stars themselves seemed to hold their breath. Across the galaxy, ancient ruins where humans had once fought glowed faintly with new energy, as if something old had been reawakened. The Empire sent more patrols, more spies, more ships into the void, but answers never came. Only silence, and the sense of eyes watching them from the darkness beyond. Even the bravest alien soldiers, those who laughed at ghost stories, found themselves glancing over their shoulders when traveling through lonely systems. Something was stirring, and it carried the name of a race they thought erased forever. And in those quiet, forgotten corners of space, far from alien eyes, humanity listened. Humanity waited. They remembered the flames of their home world, the arrogance of the Empire, the centuries of silence forced upon them. They carried their scars across generations, teaching their children not only how to survive, but how to fight when the time was right. The galaxy believed them gone, but the galaxy was wrong. One day the skies would burn again, and the Empire would finally learn what humans had always known: extinction was not in their nature. They endured. They adapted. And they were coming back. The galaxy stretched silent and cold, but silence never lasted forever. In a forgotten sector on the edge of mapped space, an alien mining convoy moved steadily through the void, hauling rare metals for the Empire's war industries. The convoy commander was relaxed, confident in the belief that no enemies remained. Their empire ruled unchallenged, and pirates rarely dared to strike so far from trade routes. But as the ships moved past a shattered moon, their scanners flickered strangely. Ghost signatures danced at the edge of detection, faint shadows in the blackness. The crew tried to adjust their instruments, believing it to be interference, but the readings only grew sharper. There was something out there, something fast and deliberate, moving in the darkness with purpose. The commander ordered a scan sweep, but before it could finish, the convoy's lights dimmed and every ship trembled as a distortion passed through them like a wave. Alarms blared as the lead transport suddenly tore open with a blast that left no sound in the void, only fire spilling into the stars. The crew screamed as fragments of their allies drifted past their windows. The attackers were invisible, hidden behind cloaks or shadows. But then, just for an instant, the veil broke. One ship emerged from the dark, sleek and brutal, a design the convoy's crew had never seen in their lifetime but one that haunted their species' oldest memories. It was a human warship. Its hull was angular, built for speed and aggression, black as midnight with streaks of glowing blue along its engines. Across its side, painted in jagged white, was a symbol the aliens had only seen in history texts, the insignia of Earth's fleet. For the convoy crew, it was like seeing a ghost come alive. Panic swept through the convoy as more shapes emerged from the shadows. Human ships, small but lethal, surrounded them in a formation too precise to be chance. The commander tried to order resistance, but the escort's weapons were useless against the attackers. Every laser, every plasma shot, was dodged with ease or deflected by shields that should not have existed. Within minutes, the convoy was disabled, left floating helplessly among the stars. Then the humans made themselves fully known. The black warship approached, its lights cutting across the ruined vessels. A transmission broke into the alien comms, filled with the harsh tones of human speech. Most of the crew could not understand, but they felt the weight of the words, the edge of command that needed no translation. For the first time in centuries, an alien officer heard a human voice directed at him. The human message was short, almost cold. The convoy was ordered to abandon its ships, to take their escape pods and flee, but not before carrying a warning back to their empire. "Tell them," the voice growled, "that humanity remembers." With that, the human ships vanished into the dark as quickly as they had appeared, leaving only wreckage and terrified survivors to tell the tale. The pods scattered, drifting back toward Empire-controlled space. By the time rescue ships arrived, the convoy's wrecks were nothing but silent metal graves. No one could explain how humans had survived, or where they had hidden their fleets. But the survivors swore on their lives that they had seen the impossible. And the warning they carried spread like wildfire across the stars. In the Empire's capital, denial came first. Leaders dismissed the reports as fabrications, lies told by frightened crews to cover cowardice. But the evidence refused to die. Black box recordings carried grainy images of human hull designs, unmistakable symbols, and the voice, raw, commanding, undeniably human. The Council of Rulers argued for weeks. Some demanded immediate strikes into the border sectors, hunting for the human fleets. Others warned that such actions might provoke the very enemy they feared. Ordinary citizens began whispering the forbidden word, humans. Markets filled with rumors, soldiers murmured in their barracks, and children asked their parents if the monsters from their history lessons were real after all. For the first time in centuries, the Empire felt fear creeping into its heart. Meanwhile, in the shadows where alien spies could not see, the humans moved like predators. They had spent generations hiding, rebuilding in secret colonies carved into asteroids, moons, and hidden stations. Their technology had grown sharper in silence, forged from both desperation and ingenuity. They had not forgotten the fire that had consumed Earth, nor the arrogance of the Empire that thought it could erase them. Every ship they built carried the weight of vengeance, every soldier trained with stories of loss and survival. Now, they revealed only a fraction of their strength, striking small convoys and border patrols, each attack calculated to spread fear and doubt. The Empire believed the galaxy belonged to them, but humanity was proving otherwise. They were not ghosts. They were not myths. They were hunters, patient and merciless. And with every strike, every whispered rumor, the galaxy began to realize the truth. The humans had returned, and the skies would not remain quiet for much longer. The Empire's rulers tried to bury the rumors, but silence was impossible to maintain when whispers became roars. In the border sectors, patrol ships began vanishing without trace, stations reported strange sensor echoes before communications were cut forever, and trade fleets arrived at port missing entire escorts. Every survivor's testimony spoke the same haunting truth: the humans were real, they had returned, and they were striking with precision that no ordinary resistance could match. Officially, the Empire called them pirates or rogue mercenaries, but soldiers in the field knew better. These attacks carried the weight of discipline and strategy. They were not random raids. They were a war, silent and deliberate, fought in shadows where the Empire was weakest. For the humans, silence was their weapon. They did not announce themselves, they did not reveal numbers, and they never lingered long enough to be cornered. A fleet might appear suddenly in a mining system, disable every defense platform with surgical efficiency, and vanish into deep space before reinforcements could arrive. Sometimes they did not even destroy. They left messages carved into wreckage, symbols of Earth burned onto drifting hulls, words etched in a dozen languages: "We are not gone." These symbols spread terror more effectively than destruction itself, for they carried the weight of an enemy believed extinct. The Empire's historians scrambled to review ancient records of the human wars, but what they found unsettled them further. Humanity had once resisted extinction with a ferocity unmatched, and if they had survived centuries in hiding, who knew how far they had advanced? On frontier worlds, alien civilians began to panic. Rumors said humans could walk unseen, cloaked in shadows, or that their warships carried weapons that could pierce planets in a single strike. Merchants stopped traveling through border routes, fearing ambush. Soldiers stationed on outposts began requesting transfers back to safer sectors. Fear ate at the Empire from within, and fear was exactly what the humans wanted. They knew they could not yet face the Empire head-on, not in open war, not against fleets that numbered in the millions. But they did not need to. They only needed to break the Empire's certainty, to show its citizens and soldiers that their rulers had lied, that humanity was alive and unbroken. In the Empire's war councils, tempers flared. Some generals demanded a massive campaign into the frontier, a purge of every system where humans might hide. Others warned that such a show of force would spread the panic further, proving the rumors true. The rulers tried to keep their empire steady, but mistrust seeped into their meetings. Secretly, they began building new fleets, stronger and faster, but the humans were always one step ahead. Spies infiltrated shipyards, saboteurs planted viruses in navigation systems, and resource convoys vanished in the dark. The Empire was bleeding slowly, its edges crumbling under the weight of an enemy it could never see coming. Among the humans, there was no doubt. They had waited long enough. They had hidden in the shadows of shattered moons, buried their colonies in gas-giant clouds, carved their homes into asteroids where no alien sensors could find them. They had trained generations for this moment, teaching children to pilot, to code, to fight, to remember. Every child learned the story of Earth's burning, every soldier carried the oath of vengeance. They were not fighting for conquest. They were fighting to remind the galaxy of what humanity was, what it had always been, a species that refused to kneel, a fire that refused to die. And in their silence, in their careful strikes, they were preparing for something greater. On one border station, an alien commander woke to find his hangars empty, every fighter stolen in the night without a single alarm triggered. On another, entire squads of soldiers vanished during a patrol, only to reappear in escape pods drifting toward home space, with a single human word carved into their armor: wait. These actions made no tactical sense, yet they shattered morale. The Empire's soldiers began to dread their patrols, knowing the humans could strike anywhere, at any time, with no warning. Even the bravest warriors began to doubt their strength. Meanwhile, hidden deep in a system no alien dared approach, the human fleet gathered. Dozens of warships, old and new, filled the darkness. Some were rebuilt relics of the First Wars, scarred but reforged. Others were sleek new predators, forged from centuries of secret engineering. They moved in silence, their commanders meeting in dim chambers where every voice carried weight. The plan was not to destroy yet, not to reveal their full power. The silent war was still young. Every strike was a message, every raid a whisper of the storm that was coming. The humans knew the Empire feared shadows, and so they would haunt them with shadows until the galaxy itself trembled at the mention of Earth. And yet, for all their patience, there was a hunger growing among them. Soldiers whispered of launching a true offensive, of burning the Empire's proud fleets as they had once burned Earth. Commanders calmed them, reminding them of the greater plan, but even the leaders could feel it. The time was drawing near when silence would no longer be enough. The time was coming when the skies would blaze, when humanity would rise not as shadows but as fire. For now, the galaxy thought of them as whispers, as ghosts. But soon, very soon, the silent war would end, and the real war would begin. The Empire had grown weary of rumors and whispers. For months, their fleets had been chasing shadows, wasting resources in futile hunts through the frontier, only to find empty systems and abandoned stations marked with the humans' defiant symbols. Panic was spreading among their people, and the High Council decided that hesitation could no longer be tolerated. A massive armada was assembled, the largest seen in centuries, built to crush whatever remnant of humanity dared to exist. Thousands of ships gathered in the cold void of a staging sector, their weapons glimmering like stars of steel, their commanders certain that once this armada struck, the myth of humanity would be erased forever. They broadcast their confidence across the Empire, declaring victory before the first shot was fired, assuring their people that the terror would end. But they had no idea what was waiting for them. For the humans, this was the moment they had prepared for. Generations of patience had led to this convergence. Spies hidden within the Empire's command structure had leaked every detail of the Armada's movements, and saboteurs had already tampered with their supply lines. The human fleet did not move recklessly. They gathered silently in the darkness beyond the staging sector, hidden by cloaking fields and asteroid shadows, waiting like predators for prey to step into the open. They did not rush forward, for they knew their first strike would define everything that came after. Their commanders repeated a single truth to their soldiers: the galaxy must not only know humanity has returned, it must feel the weight of that return. The alien armada began its advance, proud and arrogant, unaware of the eyes watching from the black. Their ships stretched across the void in endless lines, bristling with energy cannons and carriers heavy with fighters. It was a show of strength designed to intimidate, but to the humans, it looked like a beast bloated with overconfidence, slow and vulnerable. When the order finally came, it was whispered through encrypted channels, a single word carried across the fleet: now. In an instant, the darkness exploded. Human warships emerged from the void, not as a ragged band of survivors, but as a coordinated storm. Sleek ships, forged in secret, surged forward with a speed that stunned the enemy. Energy beams lanced across the stars, striking first not at weapons but at communications, severing the Empire's fleets from one another, plunging them into chaos. Then came the second wave, missiles that split into dozens of smaller warheads, weaving through defenses like swarms of fire. The alien fleet scrambled, but for the first time in centuries, they were fighting an enemy they did not understand. Their formations broke, their commanders shouting orders that never reached half their ships, their confidence shattering under the precision of the human assault. On the bridge of one alien dreadnought, a commander stared at his failing screens in disbelief. Reports came from every direction: carriers burning, escorts vanishing into debris, fighters disabled before they even left their hangars. His soldiers shouted of impossible maneuvers, of human ships weaving between barrages as though they knew every angle of attack before it came. "This is not a remnant," he whispered in horror. "This is an army." That realization spread like fire across the armada, and with it came fear deeper than any weapon. The humans fought with ferocity but not recklessness. Their strikes were deliberate, every movement part of a plan. They disabled more ships than they destroyed, leaving wrecks drifting as grim messages. In the midst of the chaos, they transmitted their first clear broadcast in centuries, a voice echoing across open frequencies in a dozen tongues: "We are humanity. We are not extinct. We are not forgotten. We are fire, and we have returned." Those words broke the last of the enemy's resolve. Soldiers who had been told that humanity was nothing more than myth now heard the truth with their own ears, saw it with their own eyes, and felt it in their burning fleets. The battle raged for hours, but its outcome was never in doubt. The alien armada, so vast and proud, crumbled under the relentless storm. Ships fled in disarray, commanders abandoning their positions, entire squadrons surrendering rather than face annihilation. By the time the fighting ended, the void was littered with wreckage, glowing with the fires of fallen giants. And in the center of it all, the human fleet stood unbroken, their banners projected against the stars, the symbol of Earth burning brighter than any sun. Across the galaxy, the shock was immediate. Civilian networks picked up the battle transmissions, spreading them faster than the Empire could contain. Worlds that had believed humanity extinct now saw the impossible. Warships bearing Earth's colors, soldiers shouting human words, an entire fleet rising from the shadows. To some, it was terror. To others, it was hope. Old enemies of the Empire whispered of alliance, seeing in humanity a force strong enough to challenge their oppressors. And in the hearts of the Empire's citizens, doubt grew like a fracture in stone. For the humans, the battle was only the beginning. Their leaders knew the Empire would not fall in a single strike, but the message had been delivered. No longer were they whispers in the dark. No longer were they shadows haunting forgotten systems. They had stepped into the light, and the galaxy had seen them. Humanity was no longer a myth. They were reality, and they were war. The wreckage of the battle still drifted through space, silent monuments to the arrogance of an empire that had believed humanity gone forever. Smoke and fire glowed from broken hulls, casting eerie shadows across the void. The human fleet moved among the ruins like ghosts, gathering intelligence, rescuing survivors from disabled vessels, and making sure their presence could not be denied. Every transmission had been deliberate, every image broadcast to ensure the galaxy understood one truth: humanity had returned, and they were no longer a fractured remnant hiding in the dark. They were a force capable of defying the greatest empire the stars had ever known. But even as their fleet celebrated the victory, their leaders knew the war was far from over. The empire would not collapse after one defeat. It would lash out, desperate to prove its power, and the galaxy would watch carefully to see if humanity's rise was real or only a brief flicker before extinction. On the human flagship, the command chamber was filled with low voices and grim faces. The admirals and strategists stood around a glowing map of the galaxy, watching red markers scatter across hundreds of systems. These represented the Empire's fleets still in operation, vast, dangerous, and regrouping even now. "They will send reinforcements," one officer said, pointing to the nearest cluster of red lights. "They will throw half the Empire at us if they must. One victory will not scare them into submission." The fleet commander, an older woman with eyes as sharp as the void itself, leaned forward. "No," she said quietly, "but it has cracked the myth. For centuries, they told the galaxy that we were gone. Now every world, every colony, every oppressed race has seen otherwise. That is a wound the Empire cannot hide." And she was right. Across the stars, whispers spread like wildfire. On mining colonies where alien workers slaved under Imperial control, secret broadcasts carried recordings of the battle. On border worlds where citizens feared rebellion, painted symbols of Earth began to appear on walls in hidden alleys, glowing with the promise of defiance. Even among the Empire's own citizens, questions began to rise. If humanity had returned after being erased, what else had their rulers lied about? What other truths had been buried beneath centuries of propaganda? The Empire tried to crush the stories, flooding networks with denials and silencing voices that dared speak of the battle, but the images had already burned themselves into countless minds. Once a spark was lit, it could not be so easily extinguished. Meanwhile, humanity moved carefully. They did not rush forward with reckless aggression. Instead, they reached out to those who had long suffered under the Empire's rule. Hidden channels carried messages to resistance groups, offering aid, weapons, and something greater, hope. A transmission repeated on a secure frequency said simply, "You are not alone. Humanity fights, and we fight for all who would be free." For races long forgotten, these words were like rain in a desert. Small uprisings flared across distant systems, nothing large enough to topple the Empire yet, but enough to divide its attention, enough to show that the galaxy was shifting. Still, not everyone trusted the humans. In the deep councils of several alien worlds, debates raged. Some feared humanity's return, remembering them as conquerors of old, warriors too dangerous to be allowed to rise again. "The Empire may be cruel," one council leader argued, "but humanity is chaos. If they burn across the stars again, we may all be consumed in their fire." Yet others countered with equal passion, "Better the fire of freedom than the chains of an empire that has strangled us for generations." In the balance of that argument lay the future of countless civilizations, and humanity knew they had to prove themselves not as destroyers, but as liberators. On the Empire's capital world, fear curdled into fury. The High Council, once confident and complacent, now roared in anger at the reports flooding in. Some demanded total war, the mobilization of every fleet, every soldier, to hunt down humanity wherever they hid. Others, quieter but no less dangerous, whispered of internal threats. They questioned how such a fleet had remained hidden for so long, how spies had infiltrated their ranks, how saboteurs had crippled their supply lines. Suspicion spread like poison, weakening the unity that had made them strong. In their desperation, they began to turn against one another, seeking traitors in every shadow, blind to the fact that this very division was part of humanity's design. For the human soldiers, the battle's victory brought pride but also weight. They knew what they had unleashed. Many were descendants of those who had hidden for generations, raised with stories of Earth's fall and the Empire's cruelty. To stand openly now, to strike back with strength, was more than a military mission, it was a reclaiming of their very identity. Yet beneath the pride, there was also fear. The Empire would come with vengeance, and when it did, the galaxy would demand to know whether humanity could withstand not just one battle, but a war that could stretch across centuries. In the dark corridors of the flagship, a younger officer confided his doubts to his captain. "We've shown them we exist," he said softly, "but what if it isn't enough? What if they crush us before the galaxy can rise?" The captain placed a steady hand on his shoulder. "Then we fight until the last star burns out," he replied. "Because for the first time in centuries, we are not hiding. We are living, and we are free. That is worth more than anything the Empire can take from us." And so the stage was set. The galaxy stood on the edge of change. The Empire rallied its fleets, determined to erase the humiliation of its defeat, while humanity spread its message to the stars, calling for allies, fanning the flames of rebellion. The void was quiet for now, but it was the silence before a storm. The war had only begun, and in that silence, one truth remained clear: the galaxy would never again believe humanity was gone. They were here, and their fire was spreading. Darkness returned to the galaxy like a storm rolling in from a forgotten past. The Empire had been wounded, but not broken. Its fleets, vast and merciless, began to move with purpose. From the heart of their territory, colossal warships emerged, ships older than empires, forged in the fires of ancient wars, held in reserve for only the gravest of threats. Humanity had declared itself a force to be reckoned with, and now the Empire would answer in the only language it truly understood: domination. The galaxy watched in silence as the Imperial fleets assembled, system by system, forming an iron ring around the sectors where humanity had made its stand. These ships were not sent to negotiate. They were sent to erase. No survivors, no broadcasts, no traces. The Empire would not make the mistake of underestimating their enemy again. In the cold void between stars, humanity prepared for the storm. Their victory had brought hope, but it had also drawn the Empire's wrath. Every shipyard worked without rest, producing weapons, armor, and starships as fast as resources allowed. Captains drilled their crews with ruthless efficiency, training for battles that would test every limit of their courage. The fleet's command center had transformed into a nerve center of strategy and intelligence. Maps of the galaxy were overlaid with enemy movements, and every possible route of attack was analyzed. "They're coming from 3 fronts," one strategist murmured, tracing red lines with a grim finger. "They mean to encircle us, crush us in a single coordinated strike." The fleet commander stood silent for a long moment, then said, "Then we break the circle. We choose the battlefield, and we make them bleed." Meanwhile, deep inside the Empire's own territory, cracks continued to spread. The suppression of information could not stop the truth. Smugglers carried recordings of humanity's return across borders. Pirates began targeting Imperial supply lines not for profit, but to aid the resistance. Rebellions flared like sparks in dry grass, and for the first time in centuries, the Empire was forced to divide its attention. Some high-ranking officials argued for pulling back to defend their core systems. Others demanded all-out war, even if it meant losing control of outlying territories. This division gave humanity the smallest edge, but even a small edge could mean survival. In one occupied world, an old resistance leader stared up at the stars and whispered, "They're coming." His followers nodded. They had heard the stories, seen the symbols etched into walls and broadcast in secret transmissions. Humanity had lit a fire in their hearts. Now they prepared to rise, not for themselves alone, but for a future where the Empire no longer held the galaxy in chains. The Empire's fleet arrived sooner than expected. Great black ships blotted out suns, their presence a crushing weight on every planet they approached. The first battle of the counteroffensive began on the edge of a barren star system, where a human scouting fleet was intercepted. Outnumbered and outgunned, they fought with desperate bravery, buying time for the rest of the fleet to mobilize. Their final transmission was a simple message: "Tell them we did not run." The Empire made sure to destroy everything, but the message had already spread. It was enough to steal the hearts of those who would face the storm next. The main battle came in the Arvan Nebula, a swirling cloud of gas and radiation that interfered with sensors and communications. Humanity chose it deliberately, knowing the Empire's reliance on perfect coordination could be disrupted here. The human fleet lay hidden in the nebula's depths, silent and waiting. When the Empire entered, they were forced to break formation, their ships struggling to maintain contact. That was when humanity struck. From the misty void, warships emerged like ghosts, striking hard and vanishing before counterattacks could land. The battle raged for hours, each side losing ships in the chaotic haze. Explosions lit the nebula like lightning, and the void echoed with the fury of war. Though outmatched, humanity fought with everything they had. Commanders used the terrain to their advantage, luring Imperial ships into traps, forcing them into narrow corridors where their numbers meant nothing. A single human frigate, damaged and nearly out of power, rammed a dreadnought, detonating its reactor and taking both ships with it. Acts of sacrifice became common, each one slowing the Empire's advance just enough to matter. In the end, the human fleet was forced to retreat, but not before inflicting massive damage. Several Imperial flagships were destroyed, and more importantly, the myth of their invincibility was shattered again. The Empire declared the battle a victory, but the cost had been high. Their fleets limped back to refit and rearm, while humanity fell back to hidden strongholds, regrouping and planning their next move. Across the galaxy, the perception shifted. The humans had not won outright, but they had survived a direct confrontation with the Empire's full might, and that survival was victory enough for now. In the aftermath, the human leadership sent out a message to all corners of space: "We have seen the fire. We have faced the storm. We still stand. Join us, and together we will build a future free of fear." The message was simple, but it resonated deeply. More worlds began to quietly reach out, offering aid, shelter, or simply their silence in the face of Imperial patrols. The tide had not yet turned, but the current was shifting. In the quiet that followed, the fleet commander stood alone, looking out at the stars. The cost had been terrible, but their people had endured. And as long as they endured, the fight would go on. Humanity had risen from ashes once. They would not fall easily again.